So let's get into what I spent way more of my weekend playing than I thought I was going to. The Satisfactory Alpha Weekend, which is a an indie game that's going to be coming into early access on the Epic Game Store next week, the 19th of March. And this is a first-person factory building simulator, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's kind of hard to describe because it doesn't have a lot of comparisons. It's kind of a genre that's spurred out of city management games like SimCity and City Skylines, um, as well as crafting games like Minecraft, and kind of combine those together. But the focus is just on resource gathering and resource manufacturing, basically. So you're thrown into this finite. It's a pretty big world, but it does have a limitation. It's not like Minecraft where it will go on for unlimited amount of time. If you just walk into the horizon, you're kind of like on this isolated island, but it's very big. Um, and on that island, you have resource nodes. You have there's like there's iron and copper and um, limestone. You know, the things you'd find in like typical crafting games. Um, and your goal is to mine all of them and get them back to a central hub in order to start manufacturing more complex um, items. So, like, you'll take iron and you'll smelt it into ingots, and then you can use those ingots to make steel plates. You can use it to make steel rods, and then you can take the steel rods, turn them into screws, combine those with the steel plates, and get reinforced steel plates. Um, and when you first start out, you're kind of doing all of this manually. You're picking up all of these materials and you're crafting them into different things manually, but you're slowly inching forward in order to build the buildings that you need to automate the process. And that's the overall goal, is to make all of these parts in massive quantities automatically. So you build mining things to take up the raw materials, send them on a conveyor belt to your smelter. The smelter smelts them and then puts them on another conveyor belt into the machine that creates the steel plates, so on and so forth. Um, and it's all from, typically these games are from like a top-down isometric perspective, like a RTS game or something like that. But this one's first person. So there's like an element of being like right there in the middle of your factory, seeing all these things go by on conveyor belts. And there's also a lot of exploration because you're exploring this small open world area, and there are some dangers. There's like some animals that'll attack you, and like they'll be guarding some of the resource nodes. But you can also find like caves and stuff and find more valuable resources down there, and little things, you'll secret things that you'll pick up that you don't quite know what they're for until you start researching certain things. Um, and it's like a pretty satisfying combination of all of this kind of stuff. So you have your like micromanagement game where you're building your factory and trying to get, um, you can split conveyor belts, so you can send ingots to two different types of um, processing centers, but then you're not performing optimally on any one because the supply of ingots isn't quite enough. So then you have to be like, well, what do I do? Do I, um, focus just on this right now? Do I focus just on this? Or do I look for a new source of material and go through the process of creating an entire new conveyor system to push all of the stuff back to your base? Um, So there's that element of it, and then there's the exploration, which is uh, pretty exciting. It doesn't, I don't know how much there's going to be to explore out there, but I was still coming across new things as I was poking around and traversing, and eventually you'll get vehicles which will make um, that part of it a little bit more accessible, so you're not just running around everywhere. Um, and yeah, it was just it. I had been following it for a little while, and I got an access key for the this alpha weekend, and so I was just gonna be like, oh, cool, I'll check this out. It's probably just gonna be like a um, quick demo of what the systems in the game, but it ended up being like a huge chunk of the game. Like, as you're going along, you're achieving these milestones, which essentially is producing enough materials to feed into your home base, which launches a rocket up to like this space corporation that needs all of these materials. And then they're unlocking access to new buildings and equipment for you. So that's kind of the flow of the game, where you're slowly unlocking different tiers of buildings so you can manufacture things faster and generate more power and things like that.
Mm.
And yeah, it was there's like a good chunk of content in the alpha, and then it like you could see what they had planned moving forward. And they're like, this isn't in the alpha, but you can see that there's like 5 more tiers of upgrades or something like that. So it's just like it was a good way to show you like, hey, there's definitely going to be a lot more going on here than even this kind of robust system that we already have in the game. There was some performance things. It ran pretty well most of the time, but you could tell it was loading things in when you were exploring the open world. Like the frame rate would stutter, but nothing too surprising from something that's technically an alpha version of a game. And there's some annoying things around because you're in this first person perspective, you can't get a real good overview of what your system looks like, of what your factory looks like. And sometimes placing buildings can be a little difficult to make sure you're lining everything up and maximizing space and stuff like that. There were a few times where I'd place a conveyor belt and then it would build like around me and I'd get stuck in it. So there was that was kind of annoying, but they had a like kill yourself button basically that so they took that into account basically and said respawn at your base, you hit that button, and then all you gotta do is go do like a corpse run to pick up any materials you had, but it gets you out of the trouble quickly. So there's some things around there that I don't know if that's just gonna be part of the game, something you got to deal with. Some things like that, yeah, I don't really see any way of them working around it because of the perspective they're using. But
would it not be easy to add like an aerial snap? Is it just not that sort of too dense for that?
I don't know. It could be not what they're going for. Like I think they're deliberately going for like a first person kind of thing, and deliberately not going for the over the head view of these games the way that they typically are. So I don't know if maybe they'll eventually add something like that in. But right now it seems like it's very focused on the first person. There was like a moment where I was kind of like looking over the edge of my floating island just to see like, can I see anything down there? Is it like water? What's going on? And then I fell, actually. I got too close and I fell, and there was like a little ledge coming out below me. I landed on it and I was like, oh shit. what am I gonna do now? Because where I fell from was like 100 feet in the air. So what I ended up doing was exploring this huge cave. And like there are those hazards, like some poison plants and stuff that will hurt you, but you find like fruits and nuts and stuff that you can eat to bring your health back. So if you get through it quick, you can just heal back up. And eventually I found this like rare resource that I hadn't found before down underneath what ended up being like directly underneath my base. Like, it's got a pretty good compass. It doesn't have a map, but it has a compass, and it has like markers where things are. So if you walk in that direction, you'll eventually get to where you're going. And when I lined myself up, it was like the base was like right above me and a little bit to the north or whatever. So I was like, okay, I get this really rare resource down here. Eventually, I'm going to need to figure out some way to get it up to the surface. And like knew that was going to be some big project I was going to have to undertake later on. Like I wasn't ready now because I just didn't have the tools to do it. But like I knew that you can put like a beacon down to mark an area so you can get back to it real quick if you need to. So I beaconed it and was like, okay, maybe in like 5 days eventually I'll come back here and figure out how to get this resource out of here, and I'll have the tools I need to do it. So yeah, it's like it's cool like that, because I like these types of games. I kind of, it's either love or hate, right? Because if they don't show me, if they don't give me goals, then I have a hard time spending too much time in them, because eventually I just get bored with the systems and stuff like that. But the game keeps giving you these milestones to shoot for, these things to unlock, which actually have a real impact on the way the game plays. Like they increase your production quite a bit. They allow you to produce more things more efficiently and stuff like that. So that seems to be pretty well done. Ooh. And just having the extra level of exploration is pretty cool too. Not knowing exactly what's out there and taking the time to like really get to know your environment. Yeah, the alpha only had one area that you could go in. It was like this kind of like tropical grass setting, kind of looked like Avatar, with like big crazy rock formations in the distance and stuff like that. But there was like 5 other environments that weren't in the alpha, but I don't know if they're going to be in on day one. But there's going to be different environments that you can go to, and I don't know if like, maybe the starting one is easy, and then the more you progress, the harder the environments are, or something like that. I'm not totally sure, but even just having like a different setting could be a big deal for longevity. Yeah. Anybody got any questions for me about it?
I think when you were playing, you said you had run into some like type of animals that were out there. Does it give you a way to like deal with them?
Yeah, so you start the game with like an electric taser in your inventory, and that was pretty much my only weapon throughout the game. And the enemies that so you'll find animals that are docile. There's like these little rabbit-looking lizard things that were running around, and then there were these bigger kind of almost like I guess you could call them like dinosaur kind of things on 4 legs, kind of lumbering around. They were all they weren't enemies. They were like they were pretty docile, but there were these kind of like boar animals that had like armor on them that would charge you when you got close to them. So you'd have to use the electric zapper to zap them. And I took a couple of hits. but you then also get a piece of their armor that you'd be able to take back and research, and that I didn't get enough in the alpha to fully research it, but it was going to lead down the road of like giving me armor so I could take more damage on my suit and stuff like that. So there was that, and that was just one example. I don't know if they're going to add more enemies in the game to allow you to go down more branching paths and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure, but that was the extent of the combat. It wasn't too crazy, and the creatures were the ones that were attacking you were specifically focused around resource points. So you weren't like just finding them out in the middle of nowhere. They were around resource points. So it was made some sense as to why you would have to deal with them. You weren't just finding them randomly and having to deal, because they would chase you for a very long time. I found out at the beginning. In fact, right when I started, the same one killed me like 3 times in a row because I was trying to figure out because they run fast, right? They like keep running around in a circle around you, and you gotta time your electric zap right to hit them, and then when you do hit them, it knocks them back and knocks them out of that move, so you can keep going up and spamming the button. But that first hit is sometimes kind of hard to get in. So this thing killed me like 3 times right at the beginning, and I thought I was gonna be like, well, this is just stupid. But eventually I realized that they're not everywhere, and once you kill them, they're gone. They don't come back, and then you've got access to that resource.
Yeah.
It's one of those games that if you're into like micromanagement sim games, it seems to be in that wheelhouse, definitely. The closest game that I found that is actually like this is a game called Factorio, which has been in early access on Steam since like 2012. And consistently updated, but just has not come out of early access. And this is like a top-down isometric game where you're placing things like you would in like an RTS, a real-time strategy game. But it's the same basic idea where you have these resource nodes, you build a mining machine on top of it, then the miner machine puts the raw resource on a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt brings it to a processing building that refines it, and then you take that refined resource and turn it into something else and keep going down that road. So this is the closest facsimile I can find to exactly what this game is. But it like I said, it does touch upon things that have been in other like base management games like SimCity, and Dwarf Fortress is something that comes up pretty frequently, and there's one out there recently called RimWorld that is in the same ballpark, but they're more about managing people, managing citizens, like their happiness and supply and stuff like that, and there's none of that in this. This is just making resources and sending them off to some benevolent space corporation to give you access to fancy equipment. Yeah, so it's going to be on...
Anything you'd like to see added into it? From what you played? Like wishlist stuff?
I'd like them to work a little bit on the UI a little bit, and inventory management, because it is a little cumbersome, like moving items between your inventory and like a box or a crate or a resource location can be a little... It's not as intuitive as other games. So like you actually have to click and drag them over into your inventory, and you have to put them into your inventory first before you can like split them into different amounts. So like sometimes you only need like you only need like 5 steel sheets, but in order to get those 5 steel sheets into your inventory, you have to bring the entire stack of 100 steel sheets in the in your supply or whatever, which means you're then cluttering up your own personal inventory with stuff you're not going to really need, and then you have to go back and put the remainder back in to the storage so then you can go and have enough inventory slots to do what you actually need to do. I'd like that to be improved upon a little bit. And also equipping your weapon. So when you go into your inventory, you have 2 slots. You have a hand slot, whatever you're holding in your hand, and then you have like a suit slot, which I didn't unlock any suit upgrades, so I don't actually know what's going to go in the suit slot. But the hand slot can have multiple things. That's where you need to put your healing items in order to eat them, in order to heal up. But then you need to go back into your inventory and drag over your taser in order to tase things, in order to use it as a weapon. There's no quick way to switch between those. There's no quick bar. You can't put them on hot bars to hit 2 and it brings up your taser, hit 3 and it brings up your health items. Those are used for your construction thing. So you'll hit 3 and it'll bring up your conveyor belt your ability to build conveyor belts. Because that's the focus of it. It's not really the combat, but it makes combat a little bit difficult when you're out in the middle of doing a fight and you need to heal, but you also need to quickly attack. It becomes kind of cumbersome.
When it's that tied to your progression, obviously your resource progression, you don't want something like that. Even if that is not the point of the game, you don't want that slowing it down.
Yeah, it just made it kind of cumbersome to deal with that when the few times you need to deal with it. So I would like to see that kind of looked at and maybe just a quick key that cycles through all the things that you could have in your hand would be a big improvement, because then you're not going in your inventory, which takes up your whole screen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's I'm really digging it, and I'm definitely probably gonna grab it when it comes into early access. That's gonna be an Epic Game Store exclusive. So it's not coming to Steam or anything like that. No controller support. It's all mouse and keyboard. And I don't know if they're planning on controller support. I imagine they probably are, because they'll probably bring it to consoles at some point. That's usually the way that these kinds of things go. I don't really see any reason why, as long as they improve the inventory system, I don't see any reason why it couldn't be mapped to a controller. And that would honestly be my preferred way to play it anyway. So it's going to be like $30 in early access, which is, in my opinion, a pretty good price for, even if you're just getting what's in the alpha. I think that's a pretty good price. But knowing that there's even more that they're going to have in the early access version makes it definitely a steal if you're looking to get into a game like this.
Is there a guesstimate for that early access? Or
March 19th.
I'm not sure. March 19th. Oh,
yeah, so right around the corner.
Oh, nice.
Yep. So that's my bullshit.